Zack Sabre Jr. is the G1 Climax 34 champion, but he's not challenging Tetsuya Naito at the Dome yet. The finals also led us to some new challengers for several champions. We'll look at those and we'll talk about when those matches will happen. We also have a full card for Capital Collision, all that, plus the early history of Hiroshi Tanahashi. With Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. This is Speaking of Strong Style. Welcome, everyone, to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news, issues, and events surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. Jeremy, it's been a heck of a week. We saw some terrific wrestling over the weekend, really a lot of fun stuff. And already Colin is here, Flaming Shark. It's coming home. Yes, indeed, it is. Shark, it is indeed coming home. Colin, you're here. Also, Robert Dinkins. Who else is ordering All In? He's asking. So we've got a lot to talk about here.
For a moment later on.
Zack Sabre Jr. has won the G1 Climax tournament. It was a heck of a weekend. I really enjoyed the two shows from Ryogoku Kakujikan for the most part. Or at least I enjoyed the tournament stuff. There was a lot of filler also in there that we'll talk about as we get there. But they set some things up for the future. We go into the fall having some things set up for the Destruction Tour, Destruction in Kobe, King of Pro Wrestling. And it's interesting to me, Jeremy, normally we come out of the G1 knowing what the Tokyo Dome main event is and nothing else yet for the Tokyo Dome. That's always like the first thing, G1 winner versus the champion. And then we kind of fill in things for the Destruction Tour. Then we fill in things for King of Pro Wrestling. This year, we know more about those two shows coming out of this than we do about the Dome. We still have no idea what any of the matches are going to be for the Tokyo Dome. It's a strange spot, but it does make me very anxious to see Destruction, the tour, the 20th anniversary show for Shingo Takagi, Royal Quest. There's a lot coming up that has my interest peaked going into the fall. How do you feel coming out of G1?
I had a great time with the G1. I can say that I thought that the G1 final was probably my favorite New Japan show of the year. Just top to bottom. I just felt like there was so much going on and just a lot of nuggets set along the way on the undercard, including the fantastic final that just made it a show that made me re-energized for New Japan in general. I'm getting some weird vibes about the direction for Wrestle Kingdom. And as you were talking, it made me realize that instead of setting the main event 4 months in advance and letting people decide whether that's going to be what sells them, they're doing a road to Wrestle Kingdom, they are making sure that, like every month that you have New Japan World and everything that's going on, there is a build that, no pun intended, climaxes at Wrestle Kingdom. So teasing out 2 months now who could be the champion rather than just telling you this is the title match at Wrestle Kingdom. It's a bold move. And I don't know if you want to go right into talking about that or if we just cover all the bases and get back to that in a few minutes.
Well, we'll get to the shows in a little bit, but you're right. It is a bold move to not announce a main event for Kingdom right out of G1. It's different. Mm-hmm. I still think there's time for them to do it. There are a lot of people like me who are going to go to Wrestle Kingdom, and we're in no matter who is going to be in that main event because you have to plan it all so far in advance. And I have a level of trust with New Japan, but this is a point here from Robert. He says, I'm happy AEW is partners with New Japan, CMLL, Mexico, and Rev Pro UK. And it does make for some interesting mixed cards because we also have Wrestle Dynasty the day after Wrestle Kingdom. So those organizations are going to help fill that out. And, of course, we're seeing a little bit of that with Rev Pro this weekend. All In coming up. There's a lot of that cross-promotional stuff. So I expect as the fall works its way through the fall, we may see more of that, more of those other companies coming into play as they set up these two big shows. So it's an intriguing idea. And you're right, this road to Wrestle Kingdom thing, I'm not against it. And Shark has said, we'll get to it, but they've already made the lame duck end of year period more exciting this year with one single announcement, that being Zach's announcement that we're going to talk about in a bit. And it is something interesting each month now. And we still have World Tag League to come, which to be honest, December World Tag League is about the only thing going on that's remotely interesting, because by then we kind of know the whole card. And like you said, it is a lame duck period. That not the case this year. So in that sense, I think it heightens the anticipation for a time of year that maybe is more perfunctory than the rest of it on a normal year. So yeah.
Well, I was trying to think about it, and we had the 2019 Wrestle Kingdom and last year's Wrestle Kingdom, in which we had a typical G1 winner challenge the champion at the Dome. Mm-hmm. The other years, it's been 2-night Wrestle Kingdoms. There's been stipulations, there's been mix-ups, there's been matchups. So there's this sense that you want to go back to tradition and that you want to get the feeling back, right? But I think it's really interesting that this year they're like, okay, if we just tell everyone that it's Zack Sabre Jr. and Naito in 4 months, what gives them any reason to stick around from point A to point B until then? If none of this other stuff is sticking, then we basically just said, just show up in 3 months and you're all good. And we'll hope that maybe you want to stick around in the meantime. This way, you're in for September. You're in for October. And then during October, there could be a number of things that happen. They're like, all right, I'm in for November. I'm in for December. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in January and New Japan World has 3 times the amount of subs because people got all 4 months of New Japan World rather than going the 1 month and then just like, okay, I'll just jump back in at Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there from a marketing perspective. Yeah, because if you're a casual fan, you can tune in for G1 and then kind of tune back out and say, well, I'll catch up with Wrestle Kingdom and things like that. And it's a little trickier now. You're missing out on all the big developments. And then Shark has a point. He says, or New Japan is really concerned about Naito. We're going to talk about that too. That could also be what's going on, but he's wrestling Okan, so I don't know, according to Shark there. And he says, it kind of makes sense that a foreigner breaks all the tradition, even if Zach is an adopted son of Japan at this point. Colin wanted to mention too, for the folks that are watching this whole All-In weekend and all, we've got, the Rev Pro thing, and he says TJPW are coming to Eve here in the UK Sunday. So quite a festival going on over there as the big event at Wembley Stadium approaches. So, just intriguing. So let's go over the action from this past week, and let's talk about these angles that developed over the course of these 2 shows. Now, when last we left you, we had the first round matches, and we were down to just the semifinals and the finals at the Ryogoku Kakuji-kan. And so on Saturday, August 17th, in front of 5,340 people, they had the semifinals, and they got what I think was a pretty top-heavy but excellent show.
Right.
And
great way to put it.
Yeah, but the 2 semifinal matches were absolutely brilliant. We're going to talk about those. But it led off with Mikey Nichols and Robbie Eagles. Good to see Robbie back. With Fujita in their quarter, facing Shomakato and Yoshihashi. Eagles won this one with the Turbo backpack. And that was just kind of a way to get things started. Any thoughts on this, or should we just move on to the War Dogs match?
It was nice to see Eagles back. I think he's going to be playing a big part in the near future for everything, and he had a great performance the next day. And I think it's really interesting that they're trying to keep Yoshihashi and Goto apart, but that they can't keep them apart for long. Like they're trying to set up so much with them individually and then bring them all back together that I'm fascinated with their plans with these guys right now.
The next match was Gabe Kidd and Jake Lee getting a win over Hiroki Goto and Tomoaki Honma. Lee got the face break in on Honma. They have named themselves the Mad Bastards. They have set their sights on the IWGP World Tag Team Championship, the TMDK hold. They want a title shot soon. So, considering we could use a little bit of freshness in the tag team division, TMDK is an excellent team when Shane Haste gets back on tour. Jake Lee and Gabe Kidd is an interesting tag team. I'm curious to see where it goes.
I like the Mad Bastard name. I think Gabe Kidd is one of the right guys to be with Jake Lee because I think he's got enough charisma to carry them both when Jake Lee is devoid of what he needs to deliver across to the audience. Gabe Kidd can substitute that in spades and maybe just help that out. So I really like this combination. And I think we're seeing a strong contender for World Tag League as we're moving forward. And I just like everything that was coming out of this match as well. I just thought the energy, Goto had a lot of strong momentum. Hanma had, I guess he won the C block, if you wanted to call that competition coming out of it. It's the early undercard, but you knew what the energy of the match. Like I can't quantify it other than just like there was a vibe and energy to the crowd and the match. It's like these people are here for this right now, and even if it wasn't much, they were here for it.
Yeah, Kid and Lee, it is an interesting thing. Shark kind of he says that Lee and Kid are so different. I find them an intriguing pair. I do too. And this might work in a way that some of those odd couple tag teams can work at times. And like you said, they can sort of compensate for the other one's weaknesses. And Lee did do better, right? The second half of the tournament, we talked about how he did do better in New Japan, stepped his game up a bit. I think perhaps Gabe Kidd could benefit from somebody kind of pulling him back a little bit, because sometimes he gets a little too excited in there in a lot of ways.
Energy.
And but it can also be mischanneled, and it has been a few times with him.
Sure.
So maybe this is exactly the right balance that they really need. It doesn't have to be a super long-term thing. I, like you, feel that this is more of a setup thing for World Tag League in December. You start to establish them, work them into it. And they might get a title shot well before then, but I think the idea is, remember, a Kid is supposed to be a tag team wrestler. He's supposed to be teaming with Alex Coughlin. Right. And then when we saw them, we thought, well, he could be a breakout single star. They've tried that a little bit to mixed degrees of success. Maybe tag team is the right place. I think he needs a speed limiter on him, because I do think that he goes a little too crazy sometimes, whether that's within character or just how he is. But this could help him a lot. I'm intrigued by it. And again, we've been asking for new tag teams for a while as a new tag team. So thanks.
Stagnant. When I meant energy, I meant actually like both ways. I think Lee can get Kid to calm down when he doesn't need to be manic in the quiet moments of the match. And I think that Kid has a lot of ability to draw out when Jake Lee needs to like rev up the gears, like step up the gear a little bit and go into fourth rather than like rev at 2. I think he's a guy that can just be like, get that energy going. And you saw it in their match with each other. Like there was an energy there. Like when they're in the ring, they're like, we're having a wrestling match here, guys.
Yeah. Some people just need to be pulled back a little. So after that, we had the United Empire. That was Callum Newman, Jeff Cobb, teaming with Konosuke Takeshita, who was teaming with the United Empire guys throughout the tournament. However, he did not officially join or anything like that. There was never any crowns up moment from Takeshita. But they defeated the Guerrillas of Destiny. That's Phantasmo and Jado, and Shota Umino in the next one. Takeshita beat Jado. ELP came out more enthusiastically than usual after a Shota Umino pep talk after the previous show. Takeshita won it with a world-class forearm to Jado after Jado and ELP had collided and argued a little bit. So they came out with ELP feeling good again, and he and Jado ended up crashing into each other and arguing a little bit, led to the loss. And then that was all to set up a much bigger angle involving ELP on finals night.
What do you call a tag team between Shota and ELP?
What's that?
I don't know. Like, what'd you call their tag team? Because it seemed like they're coming together as a tag team.
Well, I don't know. Oh, you're asking what their tag team name should be?
Yeah, what would you call them as a tag team? Because it feels like we're going right back down the Ren and Shota path. And if I had to read the room, I feel like Shota is the one that might actually turn on ELP.
It's possible that there's also a thing where I believe this is going to be House of Torture versus a group of Hantai guys that's going to be led by Tanahashi, Umino, El Phantasmo, Jado. I think they're all part of that now, and we'll get to how that all works out on finals night. But that could be, it's just that they're assembling the force that will oppose HOT down the stretch.
There's some interesting stuff that they are building with Shota and ELP, especially. As for Takeshita, man, everybody loves him. They love him there. They love him in Japan. The fans love him. The rest of the wrestlers love him. He is he is an interlocking puzzle piece for New Japan right now that you can put anywhere, and it just the picture fits. Like he is a universal skeleton key for the company right now.
Tyler Mirren is here, and he's workshopping a few things for us, though. He says, call ELP and Shooter the Pink Rockers or the Death Rockers. Death Rockers? That's not too bad. And Sharks just says, I'm glad ELP has a direction. Yeah, I mean, I think that's
the Phantom Riders.
The Phantom Riders. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah. So that's a thought there. So yeah, Takeshita, we're going to talk about him on finals night too, because he did wrestle on finals night. But boy, this guy I've been saying it, he just feels like a New Japan wrestler. Unfortunately. But again, I never argue with anybody who takes the money. And so we'll see if maybe he'll come back someday. But we'll talk more about it.
I get the strong. I have talked to some people, and I'm not like saying I've talked to people, but the general sense that I get is that Takeshita doesn't need AEW. Has not particularly liked his time in AEW, and he got the feeling again when he was in New Japan. And they better have a program for him at Wrestle Dynasty, if not Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh, they've got to, right?
I certainly do not have the faith that they are going to come in like gung hot on Takeshita when he comes back from this tour. Like, if he shows up at the Casino Gauntlet at All In, like, that's cool. But they showed no video clips of him during the G1. They showed no updates. They did nothing with the guy, telling what a great job he was doing on Collision, Rampage, Dynamite, anything. And for people that think that he's going to come back and they're going to strike with the iron as hot with this guy when they did nothing up to this point, it's like, I love the fantasy world that you're living in, but I've been watching 5 years of AEW.
Yeah.
And
what iron is hot? The iron's not hot to AEW fans. They're not paying attention to G1 that much. A few of them are. But a few WWE fans pay attention to G1 doesn't really mean anything to WWE. So, and I'm not
people that are in the know. There are groups of people that are aware that Takeshita is doing well and think, oh, hey, Takeshita is doing well. That's a great platform to really highlight him when he comes back to AEW. And that's the part that I have the disconnect is he was allowed to go to the G1 because they had no plans for him in AEW. And they will continue to have no plans for him afterwards. They brought in Roosh. They're focusing on Kyle Fletcher. They had backstage segments where Callis and Fletcher could have just mentioned Takeshita once, just could have said anything. And they didn't. So that's the part to me that's just a giant red flag.
I will be, if he ends up in a 6-man tag, a guy in a 6-man tag at Wrestle Dynasty with the Callis group, I'll just be so disappointed with the missed opportunity.
Will you be disappointed, or will you have been like, my expectations have been met?
Well, yeah, but I'll still be disappointed that that's where I am. All right. Next match after that was the House of Torture, and that was the whole family for the most part there. They faced Tanahashi and Yano, Oleg Boltin, Ryusuke Taguchi, and Tiger Mask. And that was just a House of Torture needing to go over because they were going to be part of something big on the second night. So Evil hit a low blow on Yano and won it. And post-match attack happened. They kept on beating on the baby faces until Umino and ELP came out and ran them off. So, and of course, the story here was that ELP was asked by Evil. Evil kept asking, can you trust these guys? Can you trust these guys? Can you trust these guys? Which could be a form of foreshadowing for sure, but we also set up things the night before. So, or the night after, rather. So they had something big planned for finals night. That was with the angle on semifinals night.
Where do you think this president versus president story is going?
Well, I think they're eventually going to have some kind of match with the presidency on the line, which is not particularly realistic. But I think
or the presidency or the House of Torture on the line.
Yeah, it could.
He becomes the president and they get rid of House of Torture. Because I can see this finally being the way they disband House of Torture at Wrestle Kingdom. Yeah, the more that I've thought about it, this is just kind of like you need a big blow off angle if you're going to take this thing apart. And New Japan is acutely aware that there is a massive dislike for House of Torture. Now, this is all just random speculation, all this, but I'm thinking that either this becomes like a stipulation match where Tanahashi and Evil go at it at Wrestle Kingdom, and if Tanahashi wins, he remains president. and House of Torture disbands, but if Evil wins, he becomes president. And I feel like there's a little bit more to that kind of plays into some other stuff that I feel like New Japan is dancing around either. Going into 2025, I feel like we're going to have a completely different vision of New Japan. And some of these guys who've been leading these factions are no longer going to be the front men of these factions.
We saw some other folks up next. It was Clark Connors and Drill Maloney. Hadn't seen those guys in a minute. And they teamed with Taiji Ishimori to defeat just 5 guys, Doki, Taichi, and Takamichi Noku. And it was a submission win for Ishimori on Taka, of course. Taka was there to take the loss over here. My only note for this match, Jeremy, as I looked at my notebook, was Maloney is tan as hell. I don't know.
So big.
He looks big.
He's huge.
He has been in the tanning booth. My goodness, he was very, very dark. It was almost funny. No, it wasn't almost funny. It was funny. Just how dark this guy was from his trips to the tank. He looked terrific. I mean, the guys, the boys are back. There's just it's time to bring some of these juniors back into things now that the G1's over.
Walker and Chris basically had to dance around the fact that that Drillo was so big by saying, yeah, he could easily compete in the heavyweight division, but he chooses to stay down in the junior heavyweight division and dominate. I'm like, diplomatic. Diplomatic indeed. But Drew Maloney, man, like, as much as Clark Connors has had like the young lion experience, there's something so charismatic about Maloney and the way that the camera follows him that his future's bright.
I think so too. It's a good team. Those two are a good team. Franchesco, Akira, Great-O-Khan, and Henare defeated LIJ. And this is, again, another setup for the next night. That was Bushi, Hiromu, and Tetsuya Naito. Bushi took a loss here, full Nelson win for Henare. And then afterwards, of course, Okan held a knee bar on Naito after the match and held up the IWGP title belt. So that's when we got the first sniff of where the direction was going. He's looking for a title shot soon. That turns out to be Destruction in Kobe. So he got the win over Naito, famously, of course, to take him out of the tournament. And he wants his title match here. And then we had a bit of a teaser for what would come on finals night involving the never openweight title with Hiromu Takahashi and Henare spending a lot of time in the ring together here. So seeds planted, so to speak. Although at the time we didn't know the title shot was coming at Destruction, but at Destruction in Kobe, it'll be Great-O-Khan versus Naito for the IWGP World Heavyweight title.
I feel like things that we have hoped for so long are finally like coming into gestation, and just watching it happen is really gratifying. Just incredibly gratifying. And we'll get to tomorrow in a few minutes, but when they started teasing this, you're like, nah, are they really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was something we've shouted about on this show for a long time. So after that, now it's time to get into this, the G1 here. So we had the B block finals. This is Yota Tsuji and David Finlay. It went 28 minutes and 5 seconds. And Yota Tsuji got the win over Finlay and eliminated the Bullet Club leader from the tournament. I thought this match was very well thought out. And especially toward the end, this was... of course, it went down to all the big moves. It always does, right? So, but after Uemura's injury, Yota Tsuji throws a deadbolt into it, hits the deadbolt suplex on it. I thought it was a brilliant way to work all that in and keep Uemura as part of Tsuji's story in a different way than maybe they even thought they were going to when the tournament started. The idea that he is now treating him like a worthy foe who has fallen, and now I'm going to do a tribute to him by hitting his big move in the biggest match of Tsuji's life at that point, outside of the world title shot he got at Dominion. That's a huge deal, and it plants a little seed where they could go right back into the ring against each other, just the generational foes, or they could eventually form some kind of an alliance. And there's an idea now that when Uemura's not there and not irritating him, and not bugging him by his mere presence, and they're having hair matches and pushing and shoving each other. Fact is, they respect each other, is what this told me, is that Tsuji kind of respects him and maybe likes that he's there to push him. And now that he isn't, he's got to take up the mantle for Uemura there. And I could see this leading to some kind of an alliance or one of those things where they come together, come apart, come together, come apart, and continue to fight whenever it is that Uemura is ready to come back. It was just one move in one match. I do understand that also, but
there was a lot of microphone work afterwards to make it clear that that's what he was doing. Though, so it was not as subtle as you want to say, because he flat out said that that's what he was doing. You know, like he propped to his opponent, to Uemura, both in this match and the match previous. You know, like. And basically said, hey, you know, like, he's not going to like me saying this, but I fight with his heart because of what he was willing to do at the time. This was a great match. You know, like, there is Yota Tsuji is the future. And every part of my being was like, I would not have a problem if he won after he won the final after this match. And when you have two legitimate competitors going to the final and it's legitimately a pick 'em, it was 50-50 to me who could win that match the next day. This was a great introduction match. And if you told me that Yota Tsuji was going to have 2 wins to 1 loss over David Finlay in 3 months this summer, I don't think I would have taken that bet. I would have gone more with a 1 and 2, but it just shows you how strong they consider him, and perhaps they're trying to de-emphasize the global title a little bit to a little bit more of the intercontinental level. And with Yota Tsuji beating that champion a couple of times, elevating him up into the IWGP conversation.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Suji is pushing for that number 2 spot in LIJ now also, which has been long held by Shingo Takagi. And I'm not totally convinced that hierarchy changes, except with maybe Tetsuya Naito sliding down the list once all of this is said and done. They seem to be setting up those two for big things, and it's an intriguing little twist to that. Suji is clearly somebody that they are trying to put in main events and put over in main events. They are getting us used to seeing Yota Tsuji winning huge matches. They are getting us used to seeing him take the microphone afterwards. That was a little bit of the knock after that first year, because he came back, lost to Sonata in his very first match, and then it seemed like he always came up short. But that is no longer the case. Now he's winning these things. And I know he lost the final to Zack Sabre Jr. That's losing to Zack Sabre Jr. does not hurt anyone. So
he's always been the front runner, though. Like, remember last year in the G1 when he was in the A block, right? We thought he might have been the guy to advance, and it ended up being Hikuleo. But if you go back and look at those records, he was the one that was winning the matches against the rest of the young guys when the other guys were losing or drawing. And he came in, I want to say, 3rd in that block. And he just got edged out by Hikuleo at the very end. But they've always positioned Yota Tsuji as the guy that's kind of ahead of the class in terms of the rest of the guys in the promotion at his contemporaneous level, if that makes any sense.
He certainly is charismatically. He's ahead, and right now the push is starting to catch up. But yeah, he could be the next world heavyweight title contender guy from LIJ right there. If indeed the plan is for Naito to ease off a little bit because of just his health and not being able to. So, Shark has a couple of thoughts on this. This is Suji's on the path along with the rest of them. He's just a bit quicker than the rest.
Right.
And he makes a point here too, that Suji making the G1 finals is great for him after winning the cup. Winning the New Japan Cup was also a huge deal for him. And again, shows that he can, that was when they started saying, hey, this guy not only gets to big matches, he's winning them, which was the step that he had not yet taken at that point. And he won the hair match against Uemura, but that wasn't, I don't think of that as a massive main event match at that stage in their careers. I think that match probably will be in the future. And he's older and over at all tracks, even if he isn't getting fast tracked too much. Well, I think there's going to be a big match for him in Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know if it'll have anything to do with the world title. It might. That's just the thing. The way this thing is all playing out, we don't know who's going to end up in that spot. So, I do think they have big plans for Suji going forward here. And he just shows that he steps up when he needs to.
So let's talk about David Finlay for a minute here, because this was the end of his tournament. And as Flaming Shark wrote, Finlay had exactly the tournament I expected and wanted for him. Yeah. He's not Kenny, actually. AJ, or Jay. but he keeps proving that he's really good. Tsuji and Finlay feels like a match will get over and over again. So Finlay is a guy that, from the outside looking in, gets shit on a lot because he's not those guys. And people expect him to deliver a Bullet Club performance as a result. But I look at what he did in this tournament, and I think he did his job. Like, he did his job, and if you're going to get passing marks with a couple of honorable mentions at the end of it, hell yeah. Some of those matches that he had, the losses particularly, his wins were so dominant that when he lost, it mattered. When he lost to Goto, it mattered. When he lost to some of these other guys, to Suji, it mattered. You know, that first night that he lost to Yuya Uemura, it made Yuya Uemura. It mattered. So he may not have been the star, but there were a number of wrestlers through this entire G1 whose performance it was to prop up the people that eventually did win. And for his block, I thought Finlay was an anchor.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job. And I'm starting to hear a little less of that noise that he sucks. Like, I'm not, again, people are saying he's not Kenny, he's not AJ. Well, who is Kenny and who's AJ? You know, those are two of the best of this entire generation. I love Jay in New Japan, all that as well. I don't disagree that he's not quite on that level, but he is a hell of a good wrestler, and he's doing some really terrific work, and he is taking the Bullet Club in a different direction. This, you know, like I said, Kenny's group was the more smart aleck Bullet Club. You had, you know, the AJ's was a little more intense. The Jay White was more Machiavellian and plotting and planning, and this one is just more straight ahead violent. That's
the barbarian.
The War Dogs are a little more violent. He's also a little bit more open than the others about, you guys are my soldiers, and it is all in service of me, than the others were, who tried to say, even if you knew it wasn't, that this is a collective, you know, we're all working together. Well, he makes no bones about that he is, in fact, using these guys, and they seem to be okay with it because they're all getting allegedly what they want out of this. So
if Finlay and New Japan could get away with calling him the Warlord, they totally would.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's one there. And
it's a loaded term that you can't really use, but if they could, they totally would, because that's exactly how he portrays himself. There was a moment, I will say, that during the entrance of this match where he had his haircut faded and the light hit him just right. My God, he looked exactly like Fit Finlay.
Yeah, he does. That's true. Can't deny him, can you? Tyler mentioned something here too. He says, I'm a huge Jay White fan, and it took a little while for him to take off, and Finlay's on that track. That's a fair point. Sometimes we talk about Jay White like he walked in on top, and he really didn't. Like, remember, we also entered through chaos, right? But you always knew that he was the snake in the grass that was going to bite Okada sometime. What we didn't know was the ghetto was going to go with him, you know, and that's what kind of gave it a little more.
It wasn't until 2019 that he ascended to the top, when Kenny left.
Yeah, and then even when he did take over Bullet Club, he lost a few on the way up, and that's worth noting too. So it wasn't an immediate thing. AJ was, and I think Kenny was so great that when he got to that spot, he was already made, if that makes sense. Like, he was, you know, but a little different path for Jay. And then, you know, David's got a lot of mid-card baggage to shake off, but I think he's doing it. So, and Shark says, I appreciate that historically all the BC leaders have their own identity to how they lead the group. It makes it not feel boring, despite the group being over a decade old. War Dogs reinvigorated BC. It's like different factions. It's very much like different. I mean, picture the War Dogs even standing next to Huey and Dewey Jackson, for the love of God. I mean, those guys used to be in Bullet Club. I mean, it just looks like, you know, in the circus, you know, it looks like the circus clowns are standing next to the killers. You know, it's just a totally different atmosphere.
The junior varsity and the varsity, like, ruggedness.
Oh, well, yeah, good grief. I mean, you're talking about guys who seem like they could destroy you and injure you versus, you know, Huey and Dewey are probably the two least physically intimidating wrestlers since the squash guys on TBS in the 80s. So it is a very different thing. So they feel like a gang, War Hero said. They feel like a gang. But anyway, hell of a good match, good performance from David Finlay. And I think moving forward, he's got the global title. He's got a match coming up that he's probably going to win. So he'll have something going into Kingdom and Dynasty. I think that'll probably be very, very interesting. And I know which one I'm hoping for, Jeremy. I'm just going to say this one right now. Is I'm kind of hoping that for Dynasty, when you have all the special guests, so but geez, could they come up with a story where Jay White could come back and challenge him again? Because remember the whole thing was Jay White's out of New Japan.
I'm waiting for them to figure that shit out.
Yeah,
at some point they have kept David Finlay so far away from AEW because they would fuck up David Finlay. Like there's so many people on the food chain that couldn't possibly lose to David Finlay that everyone's just like, fuck it, just keep David Finlay out of there. Let him build up his cachet. So when the time he comes over there, people are like, yeah, you're going to fucking lose to David Finlay and you're going to like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I wonder if there's a way to do that, because that's the story that I think would interest people in Tokyo. The New Japan fans would like to see that match. I don't think it would mean a damn thing in AEW. But if Jay White were coming back after the way he went out, after the way the fans had almost started to like Jay a little bit, and he was just about to make his big speech and he took the shillelagh on the noggin, and the way that David Finlay has talked trash about him ever since, you almost think, hey, let's go get the devil we know back to take this guy out.
I think that you need a little bit of conditioning with the AEW audience before you do the Finley's going over Jay White or any of those top.
It doesn't have to be an AEW match. It could be a Dynasty, and it doesn't have to matter.
Dynasty is going to be an AEW sponsored show. It's going
no, that's a New Japan show with AEW wrestlers on it. It's the opposite of
airing at a pay-per-view time that is dedicated for the U.S. audience, which is why I'm looking at it that way. So I want Finlay to get his flowers and for him to be put in a position where AEW fans see him as a viable threat in New Japan. And when he comes to AEW, you're like, shit, Finlay's here. It's going to fuck shit up. That's how I want it to be done. I don't believe that the creative in AEW is as such that they would be able to accommodate that for New Japan the way that New Japan would want them to do. I feel like it's a lot more likely that we get a Sonata Jack Perry scenario at Forbidden Door where Finlay has fed somebody that AEW doesn't care about winning or losing, and we get a match like that for a title that kind of spotlights it or gets a fight or a thing. And then maybe at the Forbidden Door after that, we can start laying the groundwork for Finlay being this huge terror that bothers AEW. But I don't know if you can go 0 to 60 with a Jay White Finlay match, given that they've done so little build up to this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of not quite getting your point on this, because it's a New Japan match. Wrestle Dynasty is a New Japan show with guests on it. So that's a New Japan story that would work. Jay coming back and trying to get at the guy that unceremoniously dumped him out after he had lost the loser leaves New Japan match. I guess you could come back and say, well, he's not a New Japan wrestler, he's an AEW wrestler. But that story's there for the Japanese fans who are actually going to be at Wrestle Dynasty.
I hear you.
I don't think anyone's paying much attention, and it's clear that AEW doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to New Japan. It doesn't have to be somebody that the AEW fans care about. It doesn't have to be a match the AEW fans care about. It's a New Japan match in this case. So I don't see why you couldn't do it. I think that would be... In fact, I think it would be the most interesting match Finlay could do at Dynasty, facing someone from outside the company. There are a lot of choices. There are other people that could challenge him for the global title, blah, blah, blah. But that, to me, is the most storyline-rich one for Japan.
I'm with you. I think that they should do that match. I don't think politically they will, because I think that AEW still has a lot of power and influence over the booking decisions of New Japan when it involves them. And if it involves Jay White, he's going to have opinions. And that's the only thing. It's I don't think AEW has any power all that much over Wrestle Kingdom, but I think when it comes to Wrestle Dynasty, I'm tempering some of those expectations of some of these dream matches just because of the politics. And a guy like David Finlay, who New Japan considers very, very important, but maybe AEW doesn't, that's the part where I feel like it could get a little sticky.
So anyway, the other semifinal, because we got to move forward on this.
Absolutely.
Zack Sabre Jr., Shingo Takagi. And you can't miss with these two. And they did not. It was almost a half an hour, but that wasn't even important. It was just a beautiful thing. Zack worked Shingo's knee big time. The selling was gorgeous in this match again. Shingo is such a good seller. He deserves all the credit in the world for the way he sells for his opponents in this one. And Zack worked the knee. Shingo sold it perfectly. I loved it. Zack actually kicked out of Last of the Dragon. That was a surprise. Not too many people get to kick out of that move, but they did it here. It was important enough. Zack got the knee bar after a big slap and punch exchange. It looked like it hurt. I've said it before on this one. I feel like when you wrestle Shingo Takagi, you wake up the next morning knowing you have been in a match with Shingo Takagi. and it's not that he's unsafe. He hits the William Regal thing, right? Hit very hard in very safe places. That's what Shingo does. But I'm pretty sure you feel it a little bit the next morning right there. But Shingo tapped after a long struggle where Zack got that knee bar in and really pulled on it after working on it the whole match. It was very, very dramatic, a lot of fun, two fantastic workers. And Zack bowed to Shingo afterwards, very respectful of him. Yota Tsuji came out, shook Zack's hand. The entire journey of Zack through this tournament is that he was the favorite in the block. He won the block. He got through the block, but they almost used their own booking against us in this sense because they gave us a real sense of doom. It was like, boy, it's just going too well for Zack.
They were constantly teasing Lucy pulling the football on Charlie Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he gets the win over Shingo, and at that point, I just thought, he might still lose to Suji. Right. But that was a step forward. Maybe my prediction will come true on this one. I was feeling much better after this match than I did even after the block play was over.
This match was great. I mean, you recapped it, and I don't think any recap can really do this match justice.
Yeah, there's no point.
I will
Go ahead and watch
it. When Shingo tapped, my jaw dropped. I think Melker mentioned he's tapped one other time in New Japan since he's been there. And so the fact that he did was it was an exclamation mark that Zack was the winner of this match. Wasn't, like a pinfall or a close one. It was like Shingo hit his hand on the mat and said, I give it. And it's just like, everything is just more and more concrete cement into the mixer to solidify what they're trying to do with Zack Sabre Jr. right now. And so every time that they make him look even stronger and stronger and stronger, I get a little more nervous.
And Shark mentions that it's very meta, making Zack look so strong. It's just using our knowledge of how they do things against us in a lot of ways. And then Shark says, since the G1 winner usually has more struggles, indeed, yeah, it's usually a hard road. And not that he didn't have a hard road, he had hard matches, but he was a winner all the way through it. So and that takes us into the finals the next night. So after all that, and I'll tell you what, I had some friends in from out of town over the weekend, and they watched that semifinals with me. And I just said, oh, okay, so now the two winners are going to face each other tomorrow, and stopped them in their tracks. And they're just like, those guys have to do this again tomorrow? like they are obviously not, they're fairly casual about wrestling and things. I say, yeah, they're going to go right back out there the next night. Like, oh my goodness.
It's not modern style.
They were very impressed that they did not take time off between the semifinals and finals. So up next, we have the finals night at Sumo Hall, 6,056. Going to mention the attendance just briefly. Not great. 8,056. Excuse me, it was 8,056. But down from last year. Fair enough. Last year had Okada and Ospreay. We lost some people this year, so it was down a little bit for the semifinals and finals. Not tremendous amount, but it was down a little bit. It's fair to say. I got to bring that up. I'm a venue nerd. I got a list of where it is in the attendance. So
Zack is wrestling there on the 14th, right? This is Sumo Hall that he is the king of pro wrestling is at, and this is where.
That's correct.
Right, got it. Cool.
6-man tag match. Ten Cozy back in action here, and Ryusuke Taguchi. They defeated Shoma Kato, Tiger Mask, and Yuji Nagata. Taguchi won that one with an ankle lock on Shoma Kato. And so that was mostly if you look at Tenzan, Kojima, Taguchi, Tiger Mask, Nagata, that was a tough day for Shoma Kato. Basically all of his trainers. are in there again. So you don't screw up or you'll be doing squats all night long. But if you look at this
lot
list,
of cardio work in that one. Got to make sure everyone else keep it up.
Basically the dojo trainers in there. So there you go. Singles match, Taichi after that defeats Katsuya Murashima. Tells me a little bit, Jeremy, that they felt that Murashima was ready for the singles match here. And he wrestled Taichi. It was very straightforward, backdrop driver finish. Taichi walked off like he was annoyed and disgusted that he had to wrestle a young lion. But it was a good showing for Murashima. I think he's really come along in the last few months, showing a little bit of fire. They're expanding his moveset. You remember how young lions, it's mat work, body slam, drop kick, and Boston Crab, right? That's the now they're starting to let Murashima stretch out a little bit and do some other things here. But
how many near falls did Murashima get? 3?
He got a few. Taichi was pretty generous with him.
I think that was the whole story of like Taichi, like, can't believe this guy got so lucky so many times. He's like more disgusted with himself than he was. More like a character thing. It's like, I'm not in the G1 and this guy is almost getting the better of me.
It was in character. That wasn't Taichi being unprofessional. It was just also he talked a little bit in backstage comments like, Is this what New Japan thinks of me? They think I'm a young lion. They think this is where I am. I need to get myself in gear and start doing some damage. So I think it is part of the story of how, like, Taichi, he missed the G1. Now he's got to sort of get himself back up the card.
God, can you imagine if Kanata and Taichi end up being the World Tag League duo?
No, thank you. TMDK, Mikey Nichols and Robbie Eagles with Kosei Fujita. They faced Franchesco, Akira, and Konosuke Takeshita. And this is Takeshita's final match in New Japan for this stretch anyway. And Chris Charlton mentioned something interesting during the match. I didn't realize this, that Robbie Eagles had never, until this match, been on the winning side of a match with Franchesco Akira, whether it's singles, tag, anything else. Robbie's never gotten the win, but he did here. They got the victory. And Takeshita, even though he was on the losing side of it, he did the whole bow in the aisle, and you could tell that crowd, they don't do the chants the way Americans do, but if they did, it was please come back, please come back. That whole thing. And Shark mentions that Tony sent Takeshita because he fully realizes sending him was very respectful to his partners in New Japan, but also isn't too interested to where he can't spare him for a month, which is exactly true. But my goodness, let's get this guy back. Like I said, if we have to start a GoFundMe, let's just do it so we can outbid him and get this contract, because this is a top guy waiting to happen.
I think I said it last week, but we also have to temper our expectations that
I know
and when Takeshi comes back, because I fully believe that he will be back at some point. Whether full-time or not is a completely different story. But I think he did 3 years in 2022 with AEW. So maybe another year or so, if he stays healthy, he could be back. But he came in during the G1. He got to go one-on-one with a bunch of different guys in like rapid fire format. And we got to see this whole catalog. He comes back, and he's on the roster. That's not what's going to be. He's going to be in these programs with guys doing the tags and having the one match every month, just like all the other main eventers do. So it's not going to be, we're going to get him versus every guy the way that we did. And so I consider it just a treat the way that we got the presentation of Takeshita, because it will be different if he becomes like a full-time guy on the roster. It'll be decompressed a bit more.
Here's the glass half full take on this. You're right. He's going to go back to AEW and he's going to go right back into the slot he was in. But now we have proof of concept. And what I mean by that is when that deal is up with AEW, whenever it is, like you mentioned that maybe Takeshita doesn't need the money the way that other people might or whatever. His contract runs out in AEW. Everybody now knows that he is fantastic in the strong style system. He looks great in a New Japan ring, and the crowd is 100% into him in New Japan. So I don't know how long his AEW contract is, but the reason that I'm hopeful for the future, if he's not happy there, and all indications are he understands that maybe he's not where he ought to be, he's gonna play that contract out. I mean, he's an honorable guy. He signed the contract. He's going to work it. When it's over with, there is a very obvious place to go, and that place is right to the top of the New Japan card. So not immediately, but someday it feels pretty good, unless something switches around, and there's a lot of time and a lot of things can happen. But we now know there's a proof of concept that he is a New Japan star waiting to happen. That's got to be in his back pocket as he goes through that AEW contract.
Okay, so to me, you should have Takeshita main eventing Wrestle Dynasty against the IWGP champion on January 5th.
Ooh.
Like whoever the IWGP champion, because Takeshita and Zack Sabre Jr. never had their match, if that's the case. And Takeshita and Naito never had a match, if that were to be the case. And Takeshita hasn't had a match with a number of people. We talked about when Okada and Ospreay left earlier this year. Like, they should not be on Wrestle Kingdom, and they should not be on these Japan shows for like a year. Like, ice them. Keep them out of important scenarios. There should not be an Okada main event match at Wrestle Dynasty. Ospreay, I love him to death, but he's an AEW guy now. And if he were to go and be on Wrestle Dynasty in a prominent match, it would, I feel, underserve what they're trying to do with the New Japan roster at this point, rather than build up and accentuate that New Japan roster, because the focus becomes Ospreay and Okada being there rather than this young, talented roster that can line up against the AEW roster. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just, like, there's something about it that just, it doesn't feel right putting Okada and Ospreay in a prominent position. A guy like Takeshita would be much better served for a freshness aspect.
I don't know. With Okada, here, my thought on Okada on this, we got all kinds of time to talk about this in the coming months, but because Ospreay has been pushed and has been in some incredible singles matches and big spots, and Okada really hasn't as much, that a big Okada match would kind of feel refreshing. Oh, it'd be good to see that again. See main event style Okada again, even if it is in the very last match at the end of the night. Just to see him in a big singles match would be fun. Ospreay would, I'd love to see Will, because I love Will. He's one of my favorite wrestlers in the world. So I'm hoping he's there. But I feel like Okada in a big singles match at Dynasty would actually feel a little bit fresh again, just because the AEW run has just been such a kind of a thud. And Tyler mentions this. Takeshita could be an ace of New Japan. He's amazing. They tried to bring him in as a heel, and the crowd wasn't having it. Yeah, they turned him. They just, we're not booing this guy. You have him do whatever you want. We're not booing him. So, very talented dude. And wanted to be here since he was a little kid. So, let's make this happen someday. After that, we had Clark Connors, Drill Maloney, and Taiji Ishimori again. They defeated just 5 guys, that being Doki Sonata and Takamichi Noku. Ishimori beat Taka with the Bloody Cross. And, of course, we are building up to Doki defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title against Taiji Ishimori. So that's all in the service of establishing the challenger again, and makes me very much anxious to see. I'm very anxious to see the Doki Ishimori match, because those two are just fantastically talented guys, and I think it'll be a terrific title defense for Doki. And he could win, could lose. I honestly don't know. You can make a case for putting this thing back on Ishimori. We'll get to all that as we get closer to that match, but I'm enjoying the interactions between them.
I don't discount the flipping of titles after one title defense with New Japan, not after being exposed to New Japan booking for the strong titles, the tag titles, the junior heavyweight title, and every other title out there that has flipped around when we were like, oh, they're totally not going to flip it after one title defense. Like, what are you even thinking? What are we doing here? Yeah, that's a bad premise to set, because they've done that. I think I'm really looking forward to Doki and Ishimori. They're going to be delivering, and there's not much to say about this match, because it was just like, it was there. You know what I mean? It was just there after all was said and done. But the talent in this match, it's like, it felt like Sonata was one of the least talented guys in this match, weirdly enough.
Poor Sonata. We just beat him up on this show all the time. All right. But yeah, there were a lot of things that were a little bit on the disposable side on this show. I got to say, early on there was. After that, we did have Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi Bishamon together with Tomoaki Honma facing the War Dogs, Finlay, Kid, and Jake Lee. Now, this one, going into this match, looked really bad for Tomoaki Honma. So you just figure, my God, are these 6 guys? And it was Yoshihashi getting the crucifix bomb and pinning David Finlay. So one of the things that one of the things I kind of said to myself going through this was like, all right, well, what is the future for the global title? Oh, there it is right there. So that's what they're doing. So Yoshihashi, who has established that crucifix bomb as a surprise winner, like he's done this with that move quite a bit, in whether it's World Tag League, even I think in last year's G1, throughout this year, the crucifix bomb can get anybody, and it got David Finlay. So that is going to be the global title thing, which works fine. You know, the thing is, it'll be a pretty good match that David Finlay can win and hold on to that global championship. And there's really nothing wrong with that, considering they probably have big plans for that global title and Finlay down the road. But Yoshihashi is a classic baby face. And again, you know, they get that juxtaposition of the big jerk heel against a classic baby face that everybody kind of likes. And he can get the win over the good guy and look like even more of a jerk. It works for the story they're telling.
Absolutely delighted that Yoshihashi's booking plan for this summer is like, hey, you're going to put over the young guy, and then you're going to take all of the G1 off, and then you're going to come back, and then you're going to get a global title match with David Finlay because you're a good soldier. Like, that was quite the pathway to a solid summertime. Way to go, Yoshihashi. I'm actually just delighted that he is getting this opportunity. You and I both talked about Goto and Yoshihashi being linchpins for the veterans and in New Japan for a long time. And it's not going to set anyone's world on fire. No one could be like, oh my God, Yoshihashi's finally getting his like shot. But this isn't going to be a bad match. This isn't Yoshihashi from 4 years ago who tripped and got a concussion running into the ring kind of thing. You know, like this is a different guy. This is going to be fun. And I was very, very happy to see that this was the pathway we were going on.
What we had next was the House of Torture against Tanahashi, Yano, Phantasmo, Bolton, and Shota Umino. So this began a very long, overwrought angle throughout this whole match. And what we had was House of Torture gave El Phantasmo a shirt before the match starts, a House of Torture shirt. El Phantasmo then spent the next, 5 minutes or so absolutely hamming it up, working it for all it was worth and really overdoing it about whether or not he was going to put this stupid T-shirt on and join House of Torture.
Heavily.
Oh boy. Yeah, he was emoting. Boy, he went to the Steve Buscemi, William Shatner School of Overacting for that one. But after a while, we finally got the ref bump. And one of the few times I was happy to see the ref bump, we're like, oh, okay, good. This is almost over. And so we had the ref bump. And unfortunately, it was not almost over. This was way overbooked. So El Phantasmo came back into the ring and started working with his teammates finally. After it didn't really upset the babyface as much that he didn't help him at all until then. They just seemed to think, oh, well, gee whiz, that's El. But so he finally came in. Instead, Narita hit him with the belt and then tossed the belt to Tanahashi. So ELP turns around and he thinks it's Tanahashi that hit him, or suspects it anyway. They get the advantage on the good guys. They hand ELP a chair to hit Tana, and then there's this whole thing with Jado trying to stop him, and he teases and teases and teases, and it's endless. Finally, he just drops it and attacks House of Torture, and El Phantasmo's a good guy, finally. I felt like we could have done that with a promo. This entire angle could have been an email. But in the end, there it was. And so ELP gets beaten down afterwards, everyone takes the low blows, all that kind of stuff. So it appears that El Phantasmo has joined the fight against House of Torture with Tanahashi and Umino, and that it's not actually the War Dogs that he's going after. It is the House of Torture, and he's joining the crew that's going to try to run them off. We mentioned that earlier. We think that's where it's headed down through the fall. But boy, this seemed to take a really long time.
They're laying groundwork for something. I think it's a show to turn. I think they want you to think it's ELP all the time. But, you know, I ended up doing the New Japan Fan Club sign-up thing because I was like, am I missing anything by doing this? Shota writes in his little diary on like the 13th that he's like, does anybody even like me? Am I just a gobby little shit with a big mouth? And he's talking about how much he dislikes himself.
All right. Who taught him gobby little shit? He didn't get that.
That's just Rev Pro time, man.
Probably so.
Rev Pro excursion. That's Zack Sabre all over, right?
Probably giving him the potty mouth.
A little bit of Ospreay in there. But they're setting groundwork that this guy is self-loathing, and what he was doing as a babyface through this entire G1 isn't working. I think they want you to think that the ELP that is suffering from whether he's going to go good or bad, but man, if they did ELP and Shota at Wrestle Kingdom, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
You could do something like that. It would be, the twist on it, of course, would be now it's Suji and Uemura who are the baby faces in that class.
Shota and Ren would be the heels.
Would be the dark side of that whole thing, yeah, and then it would have the whole conflict if they wanted to with Red Shoes and all that, if they wanted to get that far. But there might be some meat on that bone. We'll see how it turns out. But that was the overall angle they did right there. And after that, we were ready for an 8-man tag again with Shingo Takagi in it, so I felt better. But it was LIJ, Bushi, Shingo, Hiromu, and Naito, and they faced the United Empire crew of Newman, Okan, HENARE, and Jeff Cobb. So we've got a few previews going on here at once, and we'll get into how all that worked. But Shingo beautifully selling his knee from the night before like it was absolutely killing him all the way down to the ring whenever he got in the ring. He did do a few moves that used the knee, but he was selling the hell out of the finish from the night before. So Jeremy, to your point that Shingo hardly ever taps out, and here he makes it mean something that he did. So after tapping out the next night, he's not okay. He's not just walking around just fine. It did injure him because Shingo, and he's a great worker. Hiromu ties up HENARE with a roll-up and wins it. That, of course, sets up the never Openweight title match that I have been hoping for all along. I said Hiromu does not need to be in the junior heavyweight division. He's a made man. Let's have him do something else. And here it is. We're finally going to get a never Openweight title match for Hiromu Takahashi. And Jeff Cobb later on, after the finals, challenged Yota Tsuji, basically named his challenger Yota Tsuji for the TV title. So there's a little bit of a United Empire LIJ thing going right here. And so I'm sure we'll be seeing all kinds of preview tags with this. And then we'll have 3 different title matches coming out of it. Great Okan and Tetsuya Naito, HENARE against Hiromu Takahashi for the never Openweight title, and then we have the TV title, Jeff Cobb and Yota Tsuji. All 3 matches that are pretty intriguing. I'm anxious to see what Okan and Naito do, because their first match in the G1 was damn good, and I think it could be good again. And I am not worried about the other 4 guys involved. So I think that this is going to be some fine action.
Yeah, I'm on board for everything they got planned, mapped out for the beginning of September. There are times where you're like, okay, I can sell myself on this. This sounds fun, but this is legitimately a good lineup of matches that they have spread out, I think, over a week from like the 7th to the 14th. They've got a number of title matches on a number of different shows. So we're going to be busy when going into September.
Yeah. No, but and fun and a decent match too. By the way, they put together a decent match here, but nothing crazy good, but it was enjoyable. Now,
this was a match that was crazy good. They did put something together and was very enjoyable.
Zack Sabre Jr. and Yota Tsuji with the G1 championship on the line. Deliberate pace of start since they knew they were going long. This one went 31:04. But it was a classic New Japan main event style build where it slowly ramps up to all the big moves. And these two were fantastic in this one. Both hit Zack drivers, including Yota Tsuji. He hit a Zack driver on Zack. Both worked to hit their big finishers. But as a build, Zack used Ogawa's figure 4 roll-up. So that was Yoshinari Ogawa, of course, announced his retirement. This is the guy. When I went to Korakuen Hall in 2019, I went to a Noah show. And then it was like the second or third match. It was like an 8-man tag or a 6-man or whatever it was. One of those underneath matches. And I saw this guy come out there, and boy, he looked a lot like Yoshinari Ogawa, but it couldn't have been, Jeremy, because he would have to be in his 50s, and no one in their 50s is that good still. Is like, and I looked it up, and it was Yoshinari Ogawa. And that guy was so good for so long. I was stunned. And of course, Zack worked for Noah when he first came to Japan. That was his first. He had TMDK, Haste and Nichols, they all met up there. And they were tortured by Suzuki-gun in Noah before they joined it. Long history with the guy, Ogawa. And Ogawa is one of those player-coach types, that's in the ring and wrestling, but also tremendously helpful to people behind the scenes. Zack had a lot of kind words for him, and he used his figure 4 jackknife, in this one, which I thought was really cool. That's one of the, where he puts the guy kind of in legs in the figure four leg lock position, but then he does the jackknife pinning combination, and that got a near fall. He ended up getting the full body submission on Suji, and after a long struggle, of course, that was reminiscent of the Shingo Takagi one from the night before, Suji just could not take any more. He had every single one of his limbs in a terrible spot, and he had to tap out. And so he will challenge the IWGP champion. However, afterwards, he threw a curveball at us where Zack said that this is his favorite building in the world, referring to Sumo Hall. And his favorite building in the world, that's where he wanted to have his challenge take place. And while he respected the Tokyo Dome and what Wrestle Kingdom means, he wants his shot at the King of Pro Wrestling pay-per-view in October. He will be facing Tetsuya Naito right there. I don't know why I call it a pay-per-view. It's just a big show. It's not a pay-per-view. It's on NJPW World with the rest of them. But it will be at the King of Pro Wrestling card in Sumo Hall, not at Wrestle Kingdom. So Zack throwing us that curveball. And just fantastic match. Very emotional afterwards. It was great that so many members of TMDK were there to celebrate with him. And, Zack came off as somebody who really had been through the ringer and earned it. He talked about his influences. He talked about the people who meant something to him. He talked about Ogawa. He talked about Suzuki. He talked about a lot of things, that this was the year he had to do this for his own peace of mind and how he had dedicated himself to it. So very satisfying conclusion to what had been an excellent tournament.
This was almost cathartic, for a lot of people watching New Japan for a long time, because, I think I really started watching everything around 2017, 2018. And that was around the time Zack Sabre Jr. really started to showing up in New Japan. And then 2019, 2020, he learned Japanese. He stayed during the pandemic. He did it all. And there was a point last year where he had that TV title, and every match that he had was just absolutely fire. Where you're just like, you knew that no matter who he was wrestling, you were going to get 10, 12, 15 minutes of just the best wrestling you're going to get on the card. And he earned loyalty and respect both ways, to and from, in New Japan. And even then, I wasn't sure that they would go with him as the guy to win the G1 Climax. He said that he had to win the G1 Climax this year. He didn't say he had to win the G1 Climax and win the title at Wrestle Kingdom. Like, he fulfilled whatever he said that he was going to do. And to me, that's a giant red flag when you change the plan instead of going to Wrestle Kingdom and you want to go to Sumo Hall and you want to do all these things, because he's calling a shot. And there's something about this that has me a little uneasy that he is not going to beat Naito at Sumo Hall at King of Pro Wrestling. And so that's something I want to talk to you about at some point today. But when we come back to this, I just think this was such a fantastic match, and the right guy won. But the way that they got to this point, in which Zack Sabre Jr. literally had to vanquish, both guys in LIJ to get to the top guy in LIJ. Meanwhile, Yota Tsuji had to vanquish all of the outsiders, all the foreigners, in order he could get a shot. He had to take on Takeshita. Then he had to take on Finlay. Then he had to take on Zack Sabre Jr. The mirror pathways that they got to make you believe that it could have been either one of these guys to face Naito for the IWGP title as the winner of the G1 Climax 34 was so fantastically done and so simple that I'm just like, this is what I'm here for. This is why I love pro wrestling, is when everything fits and you see the winner here and the match and the hits and the story and where it's going and who they're going to wrestle next. When it all just comes together, it's a portrait masterpiece. And right now I feel like they're hitting in that direction.
And it was really a fun match to watch, and it was an emotional thing. I felt that Zack was, a lot of that was absolutely genuine and not in character when he was feeling so satisfied out there in the press conference, and then in the ring even afterwards, and just looked relieved, like something was off of his shoulders. Like this is the one thing he always wanted to do but hadn't done yet, and including the IWGP Championship. For a guy like Zack, one of the best, who's always, we say one of the best tournament wrestlers. Well, the company decides if he wins or not, right? But as far as putting together an ongoing story throughout a tournament, that's on him. And he does that better than anyone else, which is why he gets pushed in these tournaments, because he is so good. But it was the crowning achievement. It was the one thing that he didn't have on his resume, and he has it now. I'm glad. And Venkin's here, and he just says, was the stuff I was talking about during the Suzuki-gun Noah invasion? Yeah, that's exactly it. Zack was, and TMDK were some of the many people that were victimized by Suzuki-gun when they were sent over to Noah to help out the company as the top heel group. Shark just says the most joy I felt as a New Japan fan since Naito beat Okada at Wrestle Kingdom 14, watching Zack win the G1, something I always hoped for, but wasn't sure we'd get here. Yeah, especially because Will never won one, right? Because and then you start thinking, well, if Will didn't get one, are they going to give it to another foreigner after Kenny? Yeah, they did. And it was a well-deserved one. And Venkin says it reminded him of Suzu and Tam in Stardom last year. But like, I'm not waiting, I'm not waiting that long. They portrayed it a little differently. That one was, she was so anxious to have the match, she didn't want to wait until December. This time it was Zack is just saying he's kind of calling his shot in his building in a place that's more advantageous to him. Like that would be a better place for him to do it. And Shark mentions that the fact that Suji was a very viable winner made it more rewarding. And then, we have the supposition here from Colin. He just said, do you think Naito wins the KOPW match, but Zack asks for a rematch and he beats Naito at the Dome? Probably not that way, because they don't really have the guys that lose title matches come back and say, can I have a rematch now, and sell it off that. So there's a lot of ways they could go. We got a lot of time to talk about it between now and then, but it's an intriguing thought as to who wins that King of Pro Wrestling. We feel pretty strongly that Naito retains it. Destruction in Kobe. We're leaving out a world title match here with Okan, but it seems like that's where the jeopardy comes from. I think what might be more likely in terms of a rematch would be Zack winning a King of Pro Wrestling and Naito getting the rematch in the Dome. Not something that New Japan does a whole lot, but I think that's far more likely than Naito winning and Zack getting another shot at the Dome. I feel like if Naito wins King of Pro Wrestling, then whoever he headlines the Dome against is not going to be Zack Sabre Jr.
There's so many ways that they can go. And like I said earlier today, there's a road to Wrestle Kingdom now. And the path can be anything and everywhere at this point. Right now, to me, you cannot rule out Zack Sabre Jr. in the main event at Wrestle Kingdom. And you can't rule out Naito. You can't rule out other people. But until we get past the fallout of King of Pro Wrestling, we're not going to know the Wrestle Kingdom main event. We may not even know the Wrestle Kingdom main event immediately following that match. You know, like there is so much to play out after that October moment that it is literally like, okay, we're not giving you your answer just yet. You want your $9.99 or $12.99 or whatever it is for New Japan World. Like, you're going to have to follow along and you're going to watch these shows and you're going to get invested in all these matches down the card on your way to figuring out who's main eventing at Wrestle Kingdom. And that's how you should be doing it, man.
Yeah, it's and he's we got some more supposition here. It's Shark thinks, I think Zack is winning a KOPW. I'm wondering if he might have that classic short first reign like they like to do, and then someone beats Zack at the Tokyo Dome. That's very possible. And War Hero saying maybe the Prince main events the Dome. That would be interesting. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but it'd be fun to see. And then Zack deserves the Wrestle Kingdom main event spot, according to Colin. I'd be in for it. I would be happy if he got there. And then Venkin saying, could they make Zack beat Naito and then go towards Suji Zack again for the Dome? Yes, they absolutely could. I still feel strongly that Naito is going to be in a big match at the Dome because he's the big ticket seller, and I can't get past that point. And I feel like you have to have Naito in a big spot on there somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but yeah. And Shark said I had a potential thought that he had as well. Yeah, if they have something for Naito, then that's fine. You could do something like that if they have something special for him. And keep in mind, they're going to have some very special things for that whole week of shows there in Tokyo that we don't know about yet, that I'm sure that they are on the phones talking over ideas with and trying to put together. So if they have something for Naito that could be very exciting and fresh and doesn't necessarily have to involve the IWGP World Heavyweight title, and you could send the IWGP World Heavyweight title off on its own trajectory with Zack and Suji and still have something big for Naito, that's a good situation to be in. That's a good situation to be in if you can pull it off.
Ideally, that's probably what they're going to end up doing, but they could do so much. Like, we feel pretty good that those guys are going to be in prominent spots. Where exactly? We're right there with you. Let's see here. I asked you to come up with a few matches that you thought were really defined what you look for in the G1. Just a handful of matches for the audience to say, hey, these were the matches that if and when I go back, these are the matches that I would tell other people to see or that I'd watch. I have a few as well. Did you come up with those that?
Yeah, I'll go over mine here real quick. Some of this is going to be recency bias, but man, both semifinal matches I thought were amazing. Zack versus Shingo and Suji versus Finlay. I thought both were really exciting and done in a really outstanding way. So I think both of those are worth the time. I'm going to put out Hiroki Goto and David Finlay on the 7th. I thought that was special. Korakuen Hall, Goto's kids were there. The crowd was into the whole thing with Goto as the sentimental favorite story. That was one I'd offer up. Another one, El Phantasmo versus Takeshita, which was also on the 7th. That was a hell of a show. That match was just special between two athletes who really put something together between one another. A really exciting match. A lot of big moves. I was living and dying with it because I thought that at the end, any of these moves at the end could have been the finish. They really did that well with it. And then my last one that I want to bring up is all the way back from July 28th in Fukuoka. Hiroki Goto and Yota Tsuji. This was a hell of a battle. Classic hard-hitting match. And as a fan, it really got my blood running watching this one. Like I said at the time, it reminded me of a never Openweight title match. The BMF ones with Makabe and Ishii and Goto and things where these guys just knocking the hell out of each other. And that after that one was over, that was just like, yeah, I love stuff like that. It's part of why I love New Japan of those type of matches.
That's amazing. So I ended up having 6, and I'm just gonna run through them because I'm selfish. Takeshita versus Uemura on night 4 was
good one.
the first one that I just felt like this is what I'm here for. Also on night 7, you mentioned that David Finlay match, but I thought Kid versus Takagi on that match.
Yeah.
Kid versus Shingo Takagi was fantastic. Those two went hard with each other, and they were really testing the waters with Gabe Kidd afterwards with his workaround with the guy. And then Takeshita versus Goto on night 10. I had Takeshita versus ELP on night 12. And then Gabe Kidd versus Zack Sabre Jr. on night 13 was also a fantastic one. And then, Steven, my honorable mention was Yota Tsuji versus Hiroki Goto on night 6.
I'll tell you what my honorable mention was Shingo and Shota, who had a hell of a good match in the very beginning of the tournament.
Yes.
Pretty good stuff there. Zylo Mark 3 is here, and he says the real money match is Naito versus Hiromu.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I got to feel like they're going to get to that eventually. I agree with you that
Naito versus Hiromu for the never Openweight title.
Ooh, yeah, that we can talk there. And Venkin says the global title. Has Finlay even defended that recently? Not recently, but he's about to. So let's get to some of the fallout from all of this. So here are the next
real quick before we get into the notes, and then we do your history on Tanahashi. Quick programming notes for the next couple of weeks, just so everybody knows where we are and what we're doing.
Okay.
I will be on the Fight Game podcast tonight talking about the G1 with Garrett Gonzalez and John LaRocca. And then there will be a Fight Game Media all-in recap show with myself and Kevin Ely on Sunday immediately after the show. Steven Conway and I will be back next Thursday, and we will be having a guest who has attended the finals and the semifinals of the G1 live and in person, and we'll be previewing the Capital Collision show that'll be happening a week from tomorrow. And then a week from tomorrow, after the Capital Collision show, we will be doing our own live recap of that show immediately after. It will be probably around 8 or 9 Pacific, because the show actually starts around 4 p.m. Pacific. And then we'll be coming back again for our normal show after Labor Day on that Thursday. And we're working out a pretty cool guest on that one. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But those are all the programming notes for all the different shows that we got at Fight Game Media regarding anything New Japan adjacent.
Yeah, that was so we will have even though we don't have shows, not a lot of shows anyway, we will have some interesting things here on the program for you. So let's take a look at the next batch of title defenses. So we know the IWGP World Heavyweight title. That's going to be Naito versus the Great Khan at Destruction in Kobe. That's not until September 29th. So we got a little ways to go before that one. The other title match that night will be David Finlay and his global title against Yoshihashi. That'll be at Destruction in Kobe. We also have an interesting match. This is not a title match, but Shingo Takagi's 20th anniversary match. That is coming up, and that one is going to be Shingo, Bushi, and X, a mystery partner, against Hiromu Takahashi, Yota Tsuji, and Tetsuya Naito. The TV title will be on the Hall at Korakuen Hall on September 8th. That'll be Jeff Cobb defending against Yota Tsuji. The next night, which is also in Korakuen, the Never title will be on the line. That show will be headlined by HENARE against Hiromu Takahashi. That's September 9th.
I had that for the 8th. My bad.
September 11th, 2 days later, the junior heavyweight title, Doki against Taiji Ishimori. That's September 11th, Doki Taiji Ishimori. And then a tour of Hokkaido begins September 14th. So that is when they are going through the most of the island, hitting some towns that they don't normally get to. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of crowds turn up there as they go to some of the other towns in Hokkaido that aren't named Sapporo, for that matter. So tour of Hokkaido, September 14th. Some names we're going to see there. Yasuda and Nagai, the younger Young Lions, are going back on and getting some reps. They'll be in some matches there early in those. And Jacob Austin Young, new member of United Empire, will be on the tour as well. So we'll get a look at him. So, yeah.
Do you think it's interesting that Yano has 2 matches on this card?
Yes, I do. Yeah, he does have a couple of them there. He's in this
tag match with Sakuraba.
Yeah, he's got Sakuraba in a tag match against the Young Lions.
And then he's got a House of Torture, never open weight title defense.
Yeah, that's September 14th. So that'll be Yano, Bolton, and Tanahashi against Evil, Yujiro Takahashi, and Dick Togo. There wasn't a whole lot of an angle on this one other than, Tanahashi and Evil hate each other, so they want to fight. And they just kind of said, well, you guys have the trios titles. We'll just go and take those from you. That was
sure seems like House of Torture needs to get the one up on these guys in some way, shape, or form sometime soon.
Yeah, probably so. So that will be coming up. So yeah, he's got a defense against a tag match, and so that'd be a good way to kind of get him out of it, wouldn't it? That he's already wrestled once and all that kind of stuff. So
we got all these matches coming up on the 29th, and then the 14th.
Yeah, October 14th, of course, is that'll be King of Pro Wrestling. Tetsuya Naito or the Great Khan, whoever wins at Destruction, facing Zack Sabre Jr. for the World Heavyweight title.
What else we got?
Do we want to just run down? Now, we're going to have an extensive, detailed preview of Capital Collision next week. We're going to do that next week. Yeah, so, but just to go down the card, because we have had some matches announced. We'll have the Strong Survivor match. That'll be Matt Vandegrift and Alan Breeze. We'll get a look at Hanako, who's on excursion from Stardom, teaming with Mina Shirakawa against Viva Van and Trish Adora. So, you wanted a test for Hanako. There's a test for Hanako. Right there. Let's see what Mina and Hanako can get out of Trish Adora and Viva Van. That'll be interesting. Number 1 contender 3-way match for the strong openweight tag title. So this is to get a future title shot. Robbie Eagles and Bad Dude Tito, Tomohiro Ishii and Hiroshi Tanahashi teaming up against James Drake and Zach Gibson. This is a team I have been wanting to see in New Japan for a long time. The Grizzled Young Veterans. That's an outstanding team that got caught up in a bad angle, a Shawn Michaels angle, if ever there was one over there in NXT. But thankfully, they're out of that now. And then they had Kevin Knight, Rocky Romero, and Yoshihashi teaming up to face Drilla Maloney, Clark Connors, and David Finlay. So there is your global title preview. I have a grudge match. Fred Rosser and Tom Lawler against Jarrell Nelson and Royce Isaacs. So that's West Coast Wrecking Crew against Lawler and Rosser. Zack Sabre Jr. will face Titan. I'm excited about that one. That should be really good. Tetsuya Naito will have a singles match against TJP. So that's kind of continuing all that angle that we saw earlier in the year where TJP and Naito were antagonizing one another. Strong Openweight Tag Team Championship on the line. Shane Haste and Mikey Nichols, TMDK, against Virus and Hechicero from CMLL. Hiromu Takahashi will take on Mustafa Ali. And then we also will have the strong openweight title, Gabe Kidd defending against Leo Rush, who is from the DC area, so it makes sense there. And then the main event, strong women's championship, Mercedes Moné challenged by Momo Watanabe. So that'll be terrific. Momo's an excellent, excellent wrestler and one of the best heels in Joshi wrestling. And so she'll be up there against Mercedes Moné for that NJPW, or for the strong title, the NJPW strong women's title.
And while all this is going on, Yota Tsuji will be off at CMLL in their grand tournaments and doing a title match this week. And everybody's off doing some stuff after the post G1 thing. Zack Sabre Jr. is doing Rev Pro, but not doing All In, which I think is interesting. He certainly shouldn't be showing up in the Casino Gauntlet as a surprise entrance. It's just hustle and bustle for New Japan. Kind of go hit your dates after the G1, and then we'll reconvene in a few weeks.
Exactly. So are we ready for some history?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So I was looking back at this because right now we're in this angle here with Tanahashi and Evil over the presidency. And now the guy is, of course, well known that he is one of the greatest in New Japan history, one of the better in Japanese history. That's a pretty hard list to get on, but Hiroshi Tanahashi's done it. And I thought we would just kind of look back at his career a little bit and see how he got there. And it's a pretty interesting road. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Hiroshi Tanahashi. This will be a multiple part thing because the dude's career is extensive. But Hiroshi Tanahashi was born in Ogaki, which is in Gifu. It's about 240 miles west of Tokyo. It's close to Nagoya, actually. The closest big city from that town is Nagoya. And he played baseball in high school and didn't find wrestling until he was in college. Now, where he attended college is interesting. Hiroshi Tanahashi went to Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ritsumeikan University. This is one of Japan's most prestigious private universities. Now, this is big time stuff, Jeremy. This is not a place that allows dummies in. And it is well known for its social science and international relations program, as well as science and engineering being it's particularly acclaimed in those areas. And this is a tough school to get into, but Tanahashi did and graduated. He is listed as a notable alumnus on the Wikipedia page for the school, along with some interesting people here, Jeremy. Some other graduates of the same college. Princess Raya of Jordan. Oh, you got some royalty in there. Many politicians, CEOs, artists, and this guy, Momofuku Ando. Momofuku Ando. Now, the reason I bring him up, he founded Nissin Foods. He invented instant noodles and cup noodle. Dude invented all that. Now, I'm asking you this. Now, what would anybody in America's 20s be like if not for that guy? How many instant noodles did we all eat? Like the ramen noodle packs and all that kind of stuff? The cup noodles? Guy invented cup noodles. My God, that changed everything. So I thought that was interesting. That's another
MSG'd the shit out of all of us.
Yeah, well, that's very true. He's why we all can't make complete fists with our full fist with our hands sometimes. But you have that much salt in you. But while wrestling in college, he was actually scouted by New Japan and invited to try out. So a little bit of a different path where people try to bust down New Japan's door, so to speak, the way Sonata famously did, and Naito, and all these guys. And instead, it was Tanahashi who was basically recruited. But he completed his degree and then joined up. His tryout was in February of 1998, but he actually graduated from college in 1999, and then he joined the dojo. And I keep thinking about, here's a guy who graduated from one of the most prestigious colleges in all of Japan, and then he goes and joins New Japan Pro Wrestling. His parents had to have been thrilled. Can you imagine the smiles on their faces as he tells them, what are you going to do with your degree from one of the most prestigious schools in the whole country? I'm joining the circus, Ma. So, a bit of a rebellious streak, perhaps, from Tanahashi right there. So, he trained at New Japan. He made his debut on October 10th, 1999, and in Korakuen Hall. And it was an interesting night. I'm going to go over it here. He lost to Shinya Makabe. So that's Togi Makabe before he was Togi, in only 6 minutes and 55 seconds. Same day, Katsuyori Shibata had his very first singles match, losing to Wataru Inoue. Now, Shibata had done a junior heavyweight battle royal over the course of the summer. But other than that, this was his very first match. So Shibata Tanahashi, and Inoue, very, very new as well. All of them were kind of that batch of young lions, and Makabe was still very early in his journey too. So that card, what I just mentioned there, where those two made their debuts, was the night before a Tokyo Dome show. So they were at Korakuen Hall, and it was called like the Tokyo Dome Eve show. And that show drew a listed crowd of 58,500 the next night. Naoya Ogawa defeated Shinya Hashimoto in the main event to keep the NWA World Heavyweight title. The IWGP title was second from the top on that one. Keiji Muto beat Manabu Nakanishi to retain that belt. And Tanahashi wasn't on that card. They had debuted the night before there at Korakuen Hall. So he got his first victory on October 19th. So 9 days later in Fukuoka, beating Wataru Inoue. So I mentioned Inoue, Shibata, Tanahashi all got started around the same time. These guys would go on to wrestle each other a lot. So that was the batch of young lions that you would see opening up all these shows. Back then, they did fewer tags. You know how sometimes you'll get Ishii and Murashima versus somebody in Kato and all that. This was mostly these three guys wrestling each other for a really long time. But his first win, to give you an idea how hot New Japan was at the time, I mentioned 58,500 in the Tokyo Dome. His first win was only a few days later in a house show in Fukuoka that drew 4,500. So 4,500 at a house show. I think if they went to Fukuoka and did, a couple thousand, 3,000 right now, we would consider it a pretty healthy crowd. 4,500 for a house show back then. New Japan was in very good shape in 1999. Wouldn't be for much longer, but at that point it was. His 1999 win-loss record was 9-22. So you get the idea. He would beat the other young lions, but he would lose to a lot of them as well. Makabe in particular was kind of a class ahead, a little bit of time ahead of these guys. So a lot of losses to Makabe in there. And he fell to any main.
You didn't have to get a 2024 win-loss record, did you?
No, I didn't. We'll get to all that. But it fell to any main roster guys he encountered right there. It was mostly young lion matches. And Venkin mentions here, it sounds like the golden days of the company. It really was. In the mid-90s, it was even bigger. Like they were doing quarterly Tokyo Dome shows back then. Quarterly. And packing in far more because now they have that enormous stage so that 45,000 is about the most they can get in there because it blocks off all the seats in the outfield basically of the Tokyo Dome. Back then they just had a ramp going to the ring and they could sell all those seats. So these, but yes, it was a really good time, the mid and late 90s for New Japan. Multiple Tokyo Dome shows a year, doing great. So they had very few tag matches, like I mentioned, very few encounters with main roster guys, and he went 9-22. Now, they did have a Young Lion Cup in the year 2000. Tanahashi was in it, along with Makabe, Kenzo Suzuki, who's now Kenso in All Japan, but Kenzo Suzuki was in there, Shibata, Wataru Inoue, like I mentioned again, and Masakazu Fukuda. Now, those were the participants. So 2000 Young Lion Cup. On night one, Shibata hit Fukuda with a flying elbow. Fukuda ended up collapsing on the mat and was taken to the hospital, and he died 5 days later from an internal brain hemorrhage. So on night one of the tournament, he was taken in and then a few days later passed away from that. So that had a pretty dark pall over that entire Young Lion Cup.
Yeah.
Makabe ended up going undefeated in the round robin. They devoted the rest of the tournament to Fukuda and the loss of Fukuda. It was all dedicated to him.
Right.
But Makabe went undefeated in the round robin, lost to Kenzo Suzuki in the final, and Tanahashi actually finished 4th out of 6. And of course, Fukuda's matches were all ended up as forfeits, really. So Tana only won one match in the ring, and it was against Inoue. So he was not being promoted as the next big thing at all at this stage. He was kind of back in the pack of this group of young lions, and Makabe was kind of the star of the bunch. In the summer, he began meeting more main roster wrestlers like El Samurai, Negro Casas. He got a win over Negro Casas. That would have been his biggest career win to date. So Negro Casas, of course, big star in CMLL or EMLL, I think it was still then. But During the G1 that year, Tanahashi was in prelim tags with the other young lions sometimes, but also sometimes with Shinjiro Otani and Koji Kanemoto. So then he got hurt, so he was out for a little while. He returned on April 19th of 2001, and he was back again, mostly as a young lion, pretty much in the same place that he had been for the year before. He did get an interesting win over Scott Hall in Chiba on September of that year. So that was just a little bit after WCW went under. Scott Hall was back in New Japan, and Tanahashi got a win over him. Began seeing some more main roster guys, but in 2001, he was still 25-62. So now we're 2 years into the career, and he's about in the same place he was when he got there. Like, things are not taking off like a rocket. People are not thinking that this is the next main event guy. This is not the future ace. Like, the very few people are saying that Tanahashi's the future ace. Now he had some handicaps here. He had to wrestle guys like Giant Silva and Giant Singh. I don't know if you remember those guys, but that couldn't have been easy. But he was also in there with Tenkozy sometimes, Nagata, Kensuke Sasaki. So the one thing you can say about his second year is they started to trust him to put over more important guys. And so it wasn't just the young lions. They're still losing a lot, but he was starting to work with some of the higher guys on the card.
Got it.
He and Kenzo Suzuki formed a tag team, and they were called the Kings of the Hill. They weren't, but at least it was something, right? And so now they entered the 2001 G1 Tag League. That's what the World Tag League was called then, G1 Tag League. It was his first major tournament. It was with Kenzo Suzuki there, and they finished last on 4 points, but they were basically the young lions in the group. And their 2 wins were over Jushin Liger and Osamu Nishimura. That's a good team. And Scott Norton and Super J. Now, Scott Norton was a big star in New Japan. Super J was Jeff Farmer, also known as the NWO Sting. It's the fake Sting. So New Japan was getting a lot of leftovers after WCW went under a little bit. To give you an idea, here's who won that tournament. Kojima and Tenzan finished second. Nakanishi and Nagata finished third. Norton and Super J were down there. The winners of the tournament, Jeremy. Mike Barton and Jungle Jim Steele.
Oh.
If you remember Jungle Jim Steele from WCW, Jungle Jim and Mike Barton was Bart Gunn from the Guns, like with Bart and Billy Gunn. And that was who won the G1 Tag League that year. Woof.
Must have been a hawk bite.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, and in your USVA guy does. I mean, NWO Sting actually did get over in Japan. He did. That is a fair point. He was far more over in Japan than he ever was at being the fake Sting, the NWO Sting. But that's about as difficult a gimmick as you could get, right? But from there, he and Suzuki remained a consistent tag team, and the Young Lion opening match days were over after that. So they did finish dead last in that tournament, but after that, they were the Kings of the Hill. They were a real tag team. And their win-loss record stayed mostly on the losing side, but not as severely. Right. So after that, he was 45-60-6. So closer than other. He was starting to win almost as much as he lost. He did wrestle at Wrestling World 2002. That was the January 4th show that year. What it was called, Wrestling World. It wasn't called Wrestle Kingdom yet. And he and Suzuki teamed up, and they lost to Kazunari Murakami and Yuki Ishikawa. And that show drew 51,500. So, he got a big, and that was not the opening match of the show, by the way. It was about third or something like that. So, got a little experience in front of the big Tokyo Dome crowd. Main event, by the way, was Jun Akiyama defending the Noah GHC title against Yuji Nagata.
Capsule.
Yeah, no kidding. And then Tenkozy beat Chono and Giant Singh in the semifinal of that one. That was the semifinal. And in 2002, he entered his first G1 Climax. He finished 4th out of 6 in the A block on 4 points. Yoshihiro Takayama won it with 8 points, and Masachono won the B block with 7 points. And Tanahashi's wins were over Shiro Koshinaka and Kensuke Sasaki. Chono ended up winning that tournament, by the way, but that was his very first one. So again, not exactly launched to the moon here, right? So that was his 2002 G1, struggling through things. He's mostly working the first half of the card. He's on mostly before intermission with a few exceptions. Mm-hmm. Now, that was in September of that year. On December 5th, 2002, I'm going to read you an item from the New York Times. By Thomas Crampton, the International Herald Tribune, December 5th, 2002, the whirlwind romance of New Japan Pro Wrestling heartthrob Hiroshi Tanahashi and his TV star girlfriend, Hitomi Hara, ended with stab wounds last week. The police in Tokyo took Hara into custody on charges of attempted murder for allegedly stabbing the muscle-bound fighter twice in the back when he attempted to end their relationship. Tanahashi, who suffered slight wounds, met Hara in October when he appeared as the first special guest on her show, Strong Style. So now they say slight wounds in this article here from the International Herald Tribune. He suffered a collapsed lung. I mean, this is not necessarily a small wound. He was stabbed twice in the back when he told her that he was seeing somebody else and he wanted to end their relationship. And she tried to kill him, basically. But he missed the Tokyo Dome show from there. That was in December. He wasn't able to come back for the Tokyo Dome show. He was in Chono and Nakanishi's corner for their match. And as things went on, I wanted to bring this up, as he did come back in February of 2003. But that case, she wove its way through the Japanese legal system. And on June 11th, 2003, we got this UPI report. And Venkin says that's what the Gabe Kidd promo was about. Yeah, he brought that up times there. But a Tokyo court on Wednesday ordered probation for a former TV star who stabbed her pro wrestler boyfriend after he began dating another woman. A Tokyo District Court judge sentenced former television star Hitomi Hara to 3 years in prison, but placed her on probation for 4 years. She got 4 years probation, as it turns out. Hara was charged with attempted murder after confessing she tried to kill her boyfriend, then planned to commit suicide. That was apparently the plan in the moment. Hara stabbed wrestler Hiroshi Tanahashi in his back at her Tokyo apartment last year when he told her he was dating another woman. The Mainichi Shimbun news agency quoted the judge as saying, quote, "She committed the crime only after becoming emotional," unquote. So there you go. That's why she got 4 years of probation for trying to kill the ace. He was out of action until February 2003, like I mentioned. So that was in December, missed a couple of months. But the publicity made him a much bigger star than before. And oddly, the crowd started responding to him much bigger after he came back. And his return was the main event of a show that drew really well. So his talent was beginning to shine through, of course. People were beginning to see that this guy was a good wrestler. But now he had all this goodwill. It's like, oh my God, we almost lost this guy. You know, this guy's growing. We almost didn't have Hiroshi Tanahashi anymore. 2003 would end up being a much, much bigger year than Hiroshi Tanahashi had previously. Since 99 through most of 2002, he was just kind of hanging around there for a little bit. His first 3 years were relatively unremarkable. That wasn't going to be the case for a whole lot longer. So when we pick this up again, we'll have Hiroshi Tanahashi coming back from almost being killed by his girlfriend at the time and returning to the ring and trying to recapture the magic, or maybe even find new magic with the fans of New Japan. And that's where we'll leave off for this time.
I wish I had something like insightful to say after that last part, but that's just fucked up.
It's pretty crazy, pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, it's like domestic violence, no matter what.
Yeah.
Just bad. That's basically what it is. And you can't because it's a woman and a man, you want to make this joke or whatever. It's just not.
No, it's very sad. Man. It's very sad and it's very serious. Yeah.
What do you say to that? Nobody's life is worth that.
No, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it could have killed him and certainly ruined her career. I mean, that was pretty much it for
Things
her.
Could have gone very different for the entire world. It would have.
Well, think of it. If she'd succeeded, it could have been a murder suicide. That would have been horrible. As it turns out, at least both.
It would change so much. The entire path of this world could have changed off of the fact that a pro wrestler and a TV star were dead. You think about that. You know what I mean? You think that these things are inconsequential and these small acts of violence don't have ripple effects on the rest of the world, but they really do.
Oh, for sure.
Really, really do.
You think about, I mean, geez, would that have worked if he weren't in such friggin' good shape? He had all that muscle in his back for her to get through with that. I don't know, but I mean,
I know the dude that drove himself to the hospital with a collapsed lung. It's not impossible, but goddamn, it hurt.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. Well, anyway, we'll get back to Hiroshi Tanahashi, and then I do have one more question from Colin about the what do I think of Saya Kamatani's heel turn in Stardom as we go through the 5-star Grand Prix, and I'm struggling to catch up. I'm getting closer, but Kamatani, I'm not the biggest Kamatani guy to begin with. When she was a babyface there, I just thought that something was kind of missing for her. I also thought she was a little bit reckless sometimes. She's all arms and legs, so sometimes I don't think she has full control over where they necessarily go. She's good. I don't think she's great. And this whole kind of brooding, all in black, she's mad at the world. It looks like a high school kid going through a goth phase to me. And it's just not, one, she looks really young. I mean, I think she's in her 20s like most of them, but she just kind of looks like a kid going through a goth phase, and it's not doing it for me. I'm not jumping through hoops about this. So that's my thought on Saya Kamatani so far, and the redesigned HATE hate group that has replaced Oedo Tai as the top heel group. So, or Venkin just says going through a breakup, like a teenager going through a breakup. She's just mad at the world and playing all the sad songs. She's playing Morrissey and whatever else in there, just wallowing in her misery, and we have to wallow with her. Apparently, that's basically what I'm getting out of it.
I have no opinion. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay. That's part. It's the big angle in Stardom right now as they go through their 5-star Grand Prix.
I've been unable to accommodate bandwidth for anything beyond New Japan and a few other things right now. Pro wrestling.
I'm struggling. I've been struggling. There have been a lot of shows in a very short amount of time, but at least it's been really good wrestling.
All right, get us out of here, Steven.
We will be back next week to preview Capital Collision. We will have a guest that was there in the arenas live, so he'll be able to tell us all about what that was like being in that building as Zack Sabre Jr. captured G1 Climax 34. So make sure you check out all the shows on the Fight Game Media Network. Power Bombshells is on Sunday. I believe that's an earlier time, by the way. I think because of All In, they're doing a show. I believe they'll
be 2 hours or 3 hours earlier than normal.
Yeah, I think it's 11 o'clock Eastern is when they're going on, but they'll get you set up for All In before the big show out in London. Make sure you tune in for that. For Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. We'll be back next week, and we'll talk to you again real soon.